What is good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode brought to you by the League FFB. Today, we're going to be going through some players you should be targeting on the waiver wire here in Week 14, the final week of the fantasy football regular season, before we get into those fantasy football playoffs. So hopefully you guys are teams that are already looking to have clinched the fantasy playoffs, or maybe you're looking to do it here this week. Hopefully we can help you do that with some of these pickups. Maybe they can be contributors on your teams here during the last week of the season. But with that being said, let's not waste any more time. Let's hop right into today's video and let's start talking about these waiver wire pickups. All right, now as I always do, I'm going to give you guys a list of waiver wire priority candidates. These players are all above that 50% rostership threshold that we look for when we're talking about the waiver wire pickups. But if you're in a smaller league, maybe a less competitive league, maybe some of these guys have slipped through the cracks. So just double check to make sure they're not available, because these players are definitely worth rostering. It's going to be Jaden Daniels, Kyle Monangai, Alec Pierce, Darnell Mooney, Zach Ertz, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Christian Watson, Jacoby Brissett, and Chuba Hubbard. All of these players between that 70% and 50% threshold. So like I said, just make sure you double check just to make sure they're not available. Now I'm looking at the first player that I think you should be picking up this week, and for me it's going to be Blake Corum. He is still just a handcuff option at this point in time. He has carved out, it seems like, his own role in this Rams offense, and coming off of a week here where he had 7 carries for 81 rushing yards and 1 rushing touchdown, right now only rostered in about 23% of leagues. But the one thing to note is Kyren Williams did get banged up. He came back in and he played in this game, but that is a reminder that Blake Corum needs to be picked up, needs to be on teams, because if something happens to Kyren Williams down the stretch, Blake Corum has league-winning type of running back written all over his profile. I think certainly somebody who is definitely worth grabbing right now. And like I said, 23% of leagues means he's widely available. Make sure you go out there this week to pick him up, because I don't think he should be on waivers for any real competitive league after this week, because just the high-end type of potential he has, you gotta have him on the roster. Now that can also be said for another player in Tyler Allgeier. Kind of the same situation here. High-end handcuff, carved out his own role. All of the same talking points I just mentioned for Blake Corum. 8 carries for 20 rushing yards in this one. He had a rushing touchdown, 2 for 2 in the receiving game for 35 total receiving yards. Rostered in about 47% of leagues. So people do believe in Tyler Allgeier more than they believe in Blake Corum at the point in time. But I do think that both of these players are very similar and both have that high-end range of outcomes where if something happens to the starter, this is a league winner. So Tyler Allgeier, the same talking points we had with Corum, make sure to go grab him here this week. Now, what about a tight end? There is a tight end on the waiver wire this week. One of 2 guys in this episode, spoiler alert, that I do think are worth going out and grabbing. One of them is going to be Brenton. Right now rostered in about 47% of leagues. Goes out here in this win against the Tennessee Titans, 3 for 4 for 45 receiving yards and 1 receiving touchdown. Since being activated from IR, he has clearly been involved in this offense, and Trevor Lawrence clearly trusts him. Yes, Jacoby Myers has gotten involved, and some of these other guys, Brian Thomas Jr. back in the lineup last week. Doesn't matter. Brenton is a key point in this offense. So if you're looking for some tight end help in the back half of the season, maybe in the fantasy football playoffs, I think Brenton is definitely going to be a tight end who's worth streaming in positive matchups. So he's a player that I'd be going to grab. And like I said, at 47%, he is still below that 50% threshold. Now his teammate, Trevor Lawrence, is also below that 50% threshold. Went 229 passing yards and 2 touchdowns in this one, 16 for 27, 3 carries for 25 rushing yards as well. He's a player that has played very well over the last month of the season. Quite a few QB1 performances, finishing in the top 12 each and every week. I think he's a player who has some decent matchups down the stretch here in the fantasy football playoffs. So if you're looking for some help, maybe you've had a Jaden Daniels, maybe you've had a couple of these other guys who've gotten injured, Trevor Lawrence is a player who is below the 50% threshold, who can be streamed in the right matchups to help you win some games. So Trevor Lawrence is somebody I'm also looking at, like I was his teammate Brenton. Let's go to another player, Luther Burden, at the wide receiver position. Currently rostered in 20% of leagues. Goes out this week, 4 for 6 for 36 total yards. Not the big game we wanted. That was Philly. That was the Black Friday game there after Thanksgiving slate. And I think this is a player who we've been wanting him to get a little bit more involved. It's going to come at the expense of somebody. Romo Dunze's been inconsistent. DJ Moore's been a little bit more involved these last couple of weeks. They still have Cole Kmet and Colston Loveland, and they still have the running backs in Kyle Monangai and DeAndre Swift. So this is a very crowded offense. There's going to be a lot of boom bust potential. Burden is a player who ironically Typically, we don't see this with wide receivers, but is kind of a handcuff option to multiple receiving options in this offense. Still think he has some upside if he gets a larger role. It's a little bit of a weaker waiver wire this week. I do think Luther Burden is worth picking up because of the talent, but like I said, he's going to be a little bit more boom bust and maybe harder to trust in your lineups each and every week. Let's move on to another wide receiver. This one is for you cokeheads, and no, not that type of cokehead, the Jalen cokeheads. Jalen Coker is definitely a player that I think should be worth picking up. 4 for 6, 74 total yards, 1 touchdown in this one, rostered in about 8% of leagues. So he's going to be available pretty much everywhere. I think this is a player who started the year off slow. Obviously started on IR, had the injury. Then he got back onto the football field, wasn't in a full-time role, kind of worked his way all the way back up into that role. And now we're starting to see him be a little bit more consistent. This one definitely a bigger game than he's had all year. 17.4 fantasy points in a PPR league. I think he's a player worth picking up. Bryce Young's been playing some pretty decent football over the last couple of weeks. As much as people have hated on him, he's been throwing the football around the yard a little bit, and they just went out there and beat the #1 seed Rams. So I think this is certainly a player I'm looking to grab. You can play him as like a wide receiver 3 as a streaming option each and every week. So I do think he's a player that I'm going to go out and grab if I need somebody here this week, because it does look like his role is starting to become a little bit more consistent here in Carolina after recovering from that injury. Let's go to another wide receiver. This one for the New York Jets, Adonai Mitchell. Man, what a week from Adonai right now. 8 for 12, 102 total yards, 1 total touchdown in this game, 24 PPR points this week, currently rostered in 7% of leagues. We've had the John Mechie experience. We've had the Adonai Mitchell experience now, but Adonai Mitchell has commanded quite a decent target share ever since joining the New York Jets. Obviously, this is because Garrett Wilson is out, but Adonai Mitchell was a player that I thought was very talented coming into the NFL draft. It did not work out for him there in Indianapolis, but so far it's looked all right here for the New York Jets. I think Adonai Mitchell's a player who's definitely interesting. If you're looking for an upside stash, an upside player to have on your bench over the next couple of weeks, maybe you're going to flex him in the right matchups, I think Adonai Mitchell is worth looking at. Like I said, very talented player and starting to get some of the opportunity coming his way. And I don't expect Garrett Wilson back anytime soon. Let's go to my next player. It's going to be Isaac TeSlaa for the Detroit Lions. Currently rostered in only 5% of leagues. And the reason why we're picking up Isaac TeSlaa is there was an ankle injury to Amon-Ra St. Brown. He did kind of ruin Thanksgiving. I'm not going to lie to you, Amon-Ra. Still love you because you've been awesome for fantasy football, but you didn't give us any points there on Thanksgiving Day. TeSlaa's going to be the guy who fills in for him here on Thursday Night Football. Here's the thing, man. They get to play the Dallas Cowboys, who've been giving up a ton of fantasy points to the wide receiver position. It's unfortunate that Amon-Ra has to miss that game, but TeSlaa will be the beneficiary here. I do not expect Amon-Ra to play. TeSlaa is a definite streaming option here in a very positive matchup here in week 14. So if you're looking for somebody to plug and play into the lineup, Isaac TeSlaa might be your man. Let's go on to another tight end. This is the second tight end I was talking about earlier. It's going to be Darren Waller. He's rostered in 37% of leagues right now. Went 2 for 3 for 47 total yards in his first game back from injured reserve. I think he's a player that we obviously saw being involved in this offense earlier before the injury. First game back, you know, it's going to take a week or two for him to get involved again, but I do think he's going to be a player who's going to be very involved in this offense, especially in the red zone for Tua Tagovailoa. Obviously, they need some other guys outside of just Devon Achane, who's running the football wild right now, and Jalen Waddle. So Darren Waller is going to be a guy that I like at the tight end position. The rest of season schedule too is pretty decent for the most part, so like Darren Waller as a tight end play. Now the last player you can pick up, this is more of a super flex league. This is more of a, you know, deep 14 team type of format. Tyrod Taylor is a player that I think has played well enough over the last couple of weeks at 6% rostership percentage to be worthy of streaming in the right matchups. They just went out and beat Atlanta, 19 for 33 for 172 passing yards, 1 passing touchdown, but more importantly, 8 carries on the ground for 44 rushing yards and 1 rushing touchdown there. So a dual threat here with Tyrod Taylor. That's kind of been his whole career, but I think if you're in a deeper league, like I said, or super flex league, Tyrod Taylor is a streaming worthy option who is not rostered very widely in many formats right now, still at that 6%, so definitely worth picking up. All right, so there you have it. That is my top 10 waiver wire pickups as we head into week 14 of the fantasy football season. As always, if you found something today informative, entertaining, and or actionable, do me the favor and hit that like button. It is the best free way to show this channel some support. Also, make sure you guys are subscribed to this channel. You don't want to miss any of the content that we have coming out here in week 14 or in the fantasy football playoffs, trying to help you guys win those fantasy championships here in 2025. And last but not least, go join our free Discord. We do have a free Discord linked in the description, helping you guys with those fantasy football teams all day, 24/7, 365. There's a community of 600 plus people that want to talk fantasy football with you. So like I said, it's free to join. There is no risk in doing that. With all of that being said, I have nothing else for you guys today. So I will see you on our next episode. But until then, peace out.